Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Private Investigator Advice Podcast. I want to thank you guys for tuning in today. I hope you guys are having a great day. If you are new to the podcast, thank you for joining me and listening to these things. I would recommend if you're new to the industry or interested in the industry, go back all the way down to episode 1 and listen through like the first 10 episodes and either you should be able to figure out if this is the right industry for you or if this is not for you by just getting through those first 10. Also, be sure to visit piadvice.net and the PI Advice YouTube channel for all the videos and, reviews and podcast videos and things like that. Definitely subscribe so you can stay connected with anything that's being put out. And finally, before we get into anything else, also, if you guys would you guys visit iTunes and give the Private Investigator Advice Podcast a review? Tell them how you like it. It won't take too long. Just give an honest review. Also, that's a great opportunity to go ahead and subscribe through iTunes as well if you're on your iPhone. And if you're not, go ahead and subscribe through your podcast player or I think Google Play. All these different locations for podcasts. You don't have to just listen to them on your computer. So with that being said, I just want to let you know this is episode 93, and this is going to be what is a claims investigator and what does a claims investigator do? And I think it's important for anybody that's working for an insurance investigation company or that wants to get into that side of business to kind of get an idea of what it involves. So I'm going to kind of go through it and I'm going to kind of give you my thoughts on a little bit on this part of the industry. But anyways, before we get into that, I think it's important for you guys to know that this episode is brought to you by First Defender Tactical Gear. Now, First Defender Tactical Gear is selling a security badge, and this badge is a little bit different than the one I've seen before. Now, I've showed you guys probably in a previous episode my loss prevention badge, as I'm trying to find it right now. And now this one had to be attached to a leather backing, so they probably had to pay for two different things, the backing and then the badge. But this one, I'm going to go ahead and stand up here for you guys. This one is totally embedded into this leather case here, and it's Velcroed in. And I've talked about it before. I just want to show you. You go over your belt, and it could even be done on larger belts, but you go ahead and Velcro it down, and it's attached, and it's not going to slip off your belt. If you sit and you squinch, it's not going to pop up here. So also, I'm going to go ahead and sit down here and put this around my neck. It goes around your neck, man. And so if you just want to put it around your neck, maybe it's loss prevention, or maybe you've added security to your as I sit down here, you've added security to your business. It's definitely, you got to have one of these. You got to have one of these if you've added this to your business model. So anyways, First Defender Tactical Gear. I really appreciate that they've decided to advertise on the Private Investigator Advice Podcast. It's greatly appreciated. Anyways, you check them out. Again, embedded. It's got the metal badge here. It's got the nice leather. It's embedded. It's not going to fall off. It's all one piece. You got the dog chain to stick it around your neck. You got the Velcro to stick it over your belt. I think it's a really, really great product. And right now they are selling it for $24.95. I can't guarantee that price is going to stay that way. So you definitely want to get over to firstdefendertacticalgear.com and you want to check that out. And I appreciate you guys supporting the sponsors of the Private Investigator Advice Podcast. Okay. So let's get into the podcast itself. All right. Okay. So what is a claims investigator? Well, I just want to tell you guys that an insurance claims investigator, they have a variety of duties and they vary. And I'd love to stick it in a nice little pretty box and have it be all perfect and organized. But, there's just so many different things that you will be asked to do as a claims investigator. And so there are some claims investigators that work for the insurance company directly, and they're employed with them. And then there are some like me who work for an insurance investigation company, and then they get hired by the insurance companies to go out and do specific tasks. But when it's all said and done, these tasks at the core are just like any private investigator. It's all about collecting information, one way or another. That's what we're looking for. So just real quick, just to kind of give you an idea. Now, I did a small bit of research on what the outlook is for insurance claims investigators, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics believe there will only be a 3% increase in the claims investigator occupation, which is, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the average is or the industry average. In fact, I think my opinion, that's kind of low. I feel like 3%, maybe that's normal, but a 3% increase, at least it's on the rise, right? They did say that the approximate number employed in the industry, and this would include, and this is a big lump, it's not just one specific thing. It'd be claims adjusters, appraisers, claims examiners, and investigators. So that total was approximately 315,000 in 2014. So, there definitely is a need for these types of investigators. Insurance companies, and they switch around. Sometimes they want them on their staff, and sometimes I think they don't want the overhead, maybe. And I don't know this for sure. This is just my opinion. So they decide that it's better to just, hire out for a company who's maybe nationwide and has, more investigators to work with. So, okay. So, maybe you're interested in this now. You're like, oh, that's cool. Like, what's this about? Well, you might want to know about the education level. So, I will say, to do claims work, working for an investigation company, in most cases, it's not going to require a degree. Now, there are companies that, investigation companies that would like to hire people with degrees. It always looks better when they're, pitching to insurance companies like, hey, look at these cool investigators we have. They have these certifications, they have these degrees. So that's always a bonus. They didn't have to pay for it, but they have them on staff, right? So that looks good for them. With that being said, I mean, if you're already working for an investigation company, you can start doing claims work without a bachelor's degree in most cases, unless there's something specific to the company that you're working for. To typically, and I can't speak to every occasion, but every time I've looked, a claims investigator job in many cases is going to require a bachelor's degree if you decide to go work for an insurance company directly. So that would be something to keep an eye out for. And I don't know if they're going to require any specific degree. I mean, you'll just have to investigate that yourself. So, my opinion has changed on degrees over the years. I'll probably have to revisit that. But, obviously, if you're like, oh, I want to be, a claims adjuster or something to that effect, you're probably going to have a degree. That's usually their requirement. So, why is an insurance claim investigator assigned? There's a lot of reasons. Like I said earlier in this podcast, there's not just one specific or just like 5 specific things. Like if this happens, an investigator happens, it's not going to always be like that. There's going to be a variety of reasons why we might be called upon. Sometimes it's just to locate information. Like, they need to make a decision on a claim, but they need to make an informed decision. And so they send you out to do, such and such task, whatever that might be, which we'll kind of get into a little bit here. And sometimes they send you out because they know there's fraud, and it's just about confronting the situation. Like, it's not about investigating it. They've already figured it out. I mean, in-house, it's all but said and done that they figured out that fraud is taking place. And then it comes to a point where they kind of leverage the investigator to go out there and kind of try to get at a confession, which isn't always fun to do. It's a little stressful. But those are the kind of things that might happen. So with that being said, so I'm going to kind of give you just a kind of a broad view of some of the things that's involved with being a claims investigator. So one of the things that might happen is, that maybe there was an accident that took place. and they're having a hard time finding or getting contact with their insured, someone who they're insuring, or the other person involved. So the investigator will be asked to go, like, here's the information we have. Please go find such and so, and then sometimes it might ask you to interview them. Sometimes it's just like, hey, please let us get in contact with them. Let them know we would like to speak with them. They might not even need our help to do that, but they just want to find them. So that would be it. That's one of the core foundations of just being a private investigator in general, is locating people. It's one of those skills you kind of have to have. So that's one of the things that happens sometimes. Another thing that happens very frequently is interviewing the insured, a claimant, or a witness. And this might be for a variety of reasons. It could be a workers' compensation claim. It could be a vehicle accident. It could be a fire. It could be all these different things involved, right? Slip and falls, all kinds of things. So I won't stick it in one box. But basically, again, they'll say like, hey, please go interview the insured so-and-so, go interview the claimant so-and-so, and then locate any witnesses. And if you do, go interview them as well. We want to find out what they saw, what they know, and those types of interviews are really great for the insurance company to kind of really get a picture of what took place and what happened. And anyways, so you make it look all pretty and you send to them, and then they have their information they have to work with. So we talked about locating claimants and insured. Sometimes, like I said, we want to locate people. Sometimes it's witnesses. Sometimes there was an accident in a certain location, and what we'll do is we'll go out and we'll, like, if it's a neighborhood, we'll talk to neighbors. Did you see anything? We're trying to find out if someone saw something and maybe nobody knows. It wasn't in the police report. Now we're searching out. Sometimes we find witnesses that were in police reports. If it's something that it's hard to prove. So a lot of times there'd be people that say, hey, I parked my car here, and then when I came back, it had the tires were gone, or the door was a big old dent, and something like that. And so what we'll do is we'll go out and we're going to go look for video cameras, or we're going to go talk to business owners, patrons, things like that, to see if anybody saw anything or might have more information, or maybe even point me in the right direction to somebody who might know of what happened. And it's interesting. A lot of times those aren't very successful. I mean, it's the percentages are low because, for some reason, these things always seem to happen at a certain time when all the businesses are closed and in locations where there are no video cameras, or there's no video cameras pointing towards where it took place. But on one occasion, I will say that this happened to me. I was looking for a witness to something that had taken place. And be vague a little bit here because I can't talk about everything that I do, but it was a witness that something took place. So it was in a downtown area of a very big city in my area, and so I went out there, and I always hope for the best, but I do my due diligence. You do the best you can to get the information. And as I was at a barber shop, and I was asking the barbers who were right at the corner of where this thing happened, I said, hey, have you heard anything? And the guy getting his haircut goes, I saw that happen. Yeah. And he knew everything that happened. And I got his information, and, he's kind of like, I don't want to get involved, but I did see what happened. I'm like, well, come on, man, you got to give me that information. You got to give me something here. And so he's kind of like, here, just give my information to the insurance company, and I'll talk to them if they call. And so it was like one of those things, like really, like it just happened to be someone who lived in the area that was getting their hair cut, and they happened to heard me say something. And then now we've connected some dots here, and the insurance company can make a more informed decision about what happened. So anyways, I thought that was interesting. So locating witnesses is one of the things. What else here? Photographing an accident area. Now, this is very common in all types of different claims. It could be a vehicle accident. It could be a fire. It could be a home break-in. It could be a slip and fall somewhere. All this type of stuff, photographing, and I even put it in here. Make sure I'm not going to talk over something I already wrote. Well, that'll fall up. So yeah, we photographed it. Like someone has a tree fall. We're going to go ahead and takes out a fence and takes out their play set. So we're going to go out there and we're going to photograph the area. and again, this information goes to the insurance company. Now, a lot of times when we're photographing, which kind of takes me into my next segment here, we're going to be taking measurements. Measurements of how, if tree falls, let's measure the tree. How big was the tree? Where did it fall? If it's like someone falls in a bathroom, if someone falls in a store, I might measure the dimensions of the bathroom. We might find to see if, who's the manufacturer of, this item, which is a whole nother thing. We really we want to be the eyes and ears of our client, and we want to provide the best information possible. So, they completely know what's going on, and they feel totally educated about the situation when we present this beautiful report. And they can look at pictures and measurements and kind of a great idea of what was going on. As I mentioned before, sometimes we're there to, this is a different thing, guys, but one more thing. When we photograph and we measure, sometimes we're asked to make diagrams and things of that nature. And so that might also be required. And that's a little more time involved. But it really depends on the client and their expectations and things like that. There was one, I'm sorry, before I move on, there was one incident where there was an insurance company who had hired a company with the investigator, and he said, go out there and photograph this area. And so the investigator went out there. He took like 15 pictures, and then the opposing counsel, or the person who had a claim, their investigator went out there and found something that was contradictory to the first investigator. So the insurance company was pissed. They were mad. They were like, I sent you out there, you bring me back 15 pictures, and then their guy goes out there and finds something that could cause, this to happen. And so he's like, you go out there, and I want every square foot of this area photographed. So like on a 107-degree temperature day, I'm out there photographing, and I kid you not, I took like 500 pictures. And then I took those pictures in an aerial view, and I pieced them together so this insurance adjuster knew where every picture was taken, and so it was taken from different angles and close-ups, and what even with different things to show how could the accident happen as a result. And it took a long time, but I told the guy before I went out there, I said, listen, I'm going to take a crap load of pictures, and you're going to be more informed than ever. I'm sorry that happened to you before, but we're going to square this away, and if for some reason you're not happy, I will go back out there again and take another 500 pictures to make sure you are completely informed. So that's the kind of things that happen. It's a little task involved, and you be, sweating, and you're trying to be dressed nice, and you're just dripping with sweat, and these things happen, right? These things happen. So anyways, that's the kind of thing that you be out there doing. Again, sorry, I bouncing back and forth here, confronting an insured or a claimant regarding a claim. Like I said earlier, sometimes there's evidence of fraud, like there's just no doubt about it. And you're there to essentially, it's kind of like a tricky game you play, not to trick them, but, you present information to them like, hey, here's what we have here. This is, in so many words, you're saying what you've done is fraudulent. And it's a very tense situation because, it's a confrontation. You don't know how someone's going to act or respond to you. And in some cases, you're even worried about your safety a little bit because you're confronting people with information showing them, that they've lied about something. So that happens as well. Sometimes we interview people regarding their disability benefits. Sometimes an insured can become ill, or they can't work anymore. So they start receiving benefits, and a lot of times we'll go out there and right before they start to get their benefits, we'll do an interview that's pretty involved. It's unrecorded, a lot of note writing, and sometimes they just don't want it recorded. And so, in fact, like 99.9%, they don't want it recorded, but we find information out about how it evolved, how it happened, what their, treatment's been like, things like that. And so, yeah, they're involved, they're non-recorded, and they're very time consuming. sometimes they take 2, 3, 3.5 hours to do, because you're really digging deep into, how things have evolved with their disability. Sometimes we do things called alive and well checks. That's another thing that we do, where someone is going to receive, basically some benefits for the remainder of for their life. Sometimes they're benefits as a result of like a spouse passing away, or sometimes because of their own disability. And we go and check on them, once a year. Just and usually this is typically as they're older in life, like 70s. Things like that, and we check on them yearly, make sure they're okay, that they're their living conditions, are they getting, how's your medical treatment been, things like that, and make sure they're getting paid, their payments on time. And that's an annual thing we do. Usually takes no longer than an hour. I think I've either written some about it, or I've written it and I haven't posted it yet. But that's a whole thing that I want to discuss with you guys someday about alive and well checks and how important they are. Not just to the insurance company, but actually on another level as an investigator and as interacting with other people. Another thing is just locating any additional evidence critical to an insurance claim. A lot of time it has nothing to do with disproving an insurance claim. And I've talked about this kind of thing before. Sometimes the insurance company, like I said, just needs to locate somebody to discuss it with them. Sometimes it's just like they just don't have enough information to make a determination on a claim. And so we're out there just to help them along with that process. It's not always about, like getting somebody or, like disproving fraud. It's not always about that. In fact, more times than not, it's not about that at all. It's just about collecting enough information to give to them so they can make an informed decision. So anyways, this isn't every, and again, I can't put every little thing into a box. There's always going to be something to do. Sometimes we're interviewing people who, had their homes broken into, or vehicle thefts, or their car caught on fire, or all these different things. There's all, but these are the core things that we do: the interviews, the canvassing, things like that. A lot of phone calls are involved, trying to make appointments with people during their time when they're available. And then I will say, just to kind of give you a little insight, like there's a lot of report writing. So I told you I was going to talk to you a little bit about more at the end of this. So we're coming to the end of this here. But before I tell you my thoughts on this, and it won't be that in depth, I really want to talk about it deeper. I just want to let you know that, and if you've listened to this long, thank you so much. But the rest of this episode, the remainder that's left, is brought to you by Private Investigator Advice. Now, listen, I've been promising you a new template, and I provided a new template for sale yesterday. And so I'm going to have a link to that in the show notes here. Basically, it's a workers' compensation questions guide. It's going to give you all the questions you're going to need during a workers' compensation interview with a claimant. It's pretty elaborate. I think it's like 26 pages long, and in the template, it's got enough space for you to write notes and have different areas that I know is going to require more information. There's going to be more notes for you to put in there on the paper to kind of keep track of things. You won't have to be working with two things. I've also provided an example report for you to use and kind of get an idea of what's involved in a report like that. I've also added, of course, the report template that you would use in association with the example report. And, of course, a video walkthrough just to help you kind of understand what's involved in that report. And so anyways, definitely check that out. I'm really happy about that one. I think you'll find it valuable if you're getting into the industry, or maybe you're interested in claims work. Or if, maybe you're a business owner and you're thinking like, yeah, I want to be prepared for that type of assignment if I get one from an insurance company. So you want to definitely check that out. Okay, guys. So I wanted to talk a little bit about being a claims investigator. I just real quick, there's basically two sides or two sections of an insurance investigation company. You have the surveillance section, quote unquote, and you have the claims investigator section where you're doing interviews and pictures, all the stuff I just told you, right? And in some form or fashion, you're doing that. And I always recommend that everybody who kind of comes into the investigation industry learn surveillance. That's like it was a foundation for what I've done, and I think it's an easy foundation for everybody to learn. And then when you start your own business, you have this automatic thing that you can do that can apply to so many different things. So, but then on the investigation companies, you also have the claims side, right? And so, I'll just let you know, like when I was early on in my career, I did everything I could to learn as much as I could. I wanted to be a student of this industry. And one of those things was I really pushed because I wanted to do everything. And the more work that I could do, the different type of work I could do, the more I was going to stay busy, the more I could, make more money and I could pay my bills. So when I first started off, I was not very good. I was a student, but I just didn't have great teachers at the time. Or a great, there wasn't a great setup for teaching people how to do this type of work. Anyways, so I want to tell you kind of some of the good things and the bad things about it. And I'll kind of walk you through and this is kind of a big overview of what, kind of how a case evolves in a claims investigation. So, essentially the insurance company needs an investigator to do something. And we will be like, hey, make contact with so-and-so, go take photos of this, interview so-and-so. And usually we have kind of a window to get it done. We want to get it done in a certain amount of time. It doesn't always work that way because not everybody is cooperating with us and we have other files and things like that. So one of the first things we do is we make appointments with whoever. So if we need to interview a claimant or an insured or a witness or whoever it is, we start making phone calls. Now, more times than not, we don't get answers on those phone calls. And so we're making these phone calls and the case isn't moving forward until we, make contact with them. So it's kind of like a process. And I would just, at this beginning stage of the investigation or the objective, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of money in it, right? Because you're making these small amount of phone calls, and insurance companies or not insurance companies, your company that you're working for is only going to pay you so much for those phone calls. So it's kind of time consuming, and it's kind of a drag when you're putting time and thinking about these things, and you're not getting the compensation you would love to have right off the bat. And so eventually you're going to get, make contact with the person or whoever you need to do to make these appointments. And then it could drag on even more. Sometimes like, well, let me get back to you. Let me find a good day. Or, and sometimes they're resistant. I don't want to do the interview. Well, let me talk to somebody before I schedule that with you. And so again, there's more delay, right, on this file. And this is just one file. You should have many files happening at the same time. So there's a lot to keep track of. So let's say for the sake of argument that you finally get things arranged and you set up for a time and date to meet, and then you go to meet with that person wherever, you're supposed to. And in some cases, there are no shows. You've arrived at the Starbucks to do an interview and they don't show up. And now you might not get paid for much of what you've done. And so you've wasted more time. But sometimes they do show up and everything's fine and you do the interview. And let's say it was just a claimant interview. Someone got hurt, maybe you spend the hour, 2 hours interviewing them. And then when it's all said and done, let's just say it was a really simple task interview. You go home and you write that report. And you upload the audio to your company or you provide the audio to the client, wherever you are, if you're your own business or you're working for somebody. And then usually, unless there's any follow-up or, additional information needed, usually you're done with the file. Now, unfortunately, all these things aren't as cut and dry. And I did share a lot of the struggles that happen with these types of things, of this kind of a grind of trying to get to the point where you're actually making money and moving the case forward, right? You're moving, getting past the phone call, you're getting to the appointment, then you're getting the statement and things like that. So, of course, after everything's done, you got to produce the final product that's of photos. And again, we're creating a report that is understandable for your client, so they have a clear idea of what took place. And that requires having the proper answers or questions answered, digging deep, painting a picture of what happened, identifying any red flags or concerns that you might have that they might want to dig into deeper, things like that. So the reason I liked, and I'll even kind of tell you little personal things, like I stopped, when I was working for a company, I stopped doing any surveillance for them because of my family situation, right? I needed to be able to do certain things at certain times. So I needed a very flexible schedule. And that's one of the things that being a claims investigator allows you to do, is to have a more flexible schedule. So, for instance, I was able to schedule things after I took my kids to school. So I would, take the kids to school. I'd go do an interview or 2 interviews, and then I'd be back in time to pick them up from school and then take them to their activities and things like that. And then after, towards the end of the night, I would work on reports and things of that nature. Some days were just, admin days where I would just be at home in my office and I'd just be working on reports all day long. And that's a lot of listening to recordings sometimes, because as much as I'd like to say I write great notes, I want to make sure I get it right when I'm writing the report. So, it can be pretty brutal when depending on how an interview kind of takes place and how it evolves. If you've got to go back and listen to an hour and a half or 2 hours of audio just to make sure that you are, answering everything in the report correctly. So I feel like that's one of the drags about it. I mean, I think the field work is fun. It's I want to say it's entertaining, but it's more interesting. So that's definitely one of the better parts of it, is the flexibility of it. When you're scheduled for a surveillance, you're scheduled for a surveillance, and that's going to happen, right? And most times you don't get as much flexibility with it. You're going to start at a certain time, and you're going to stay with the file as long as the person's active. Unfortunately, with surveillance, you get bigger chunks of time. In the insurance, claims investigation, the chunks of time are smaller, and you take chances. So if you do multiple interviews in a day, you've got to space them out far enough to where if an interview goes long, that you still have time to drive to the next one and do the next interview. Like, you're not overlapping, you're not having to cancel anything. So that can be it can be challenging. So anyways, that was just a little quick explanation of kind of what a claims investigator does. And again, they have a much wider scope depending on, any certifications and things like that. But, generally speaking, what I shared with you today in this podcast is like the core responsibilities. And of course, it's a very broad view of what happens. But at its core, we're collecting information. And just like any private investigator, which I'm telling you guys all the time, whether it be surveillance or doing claims work or any type of other investigative work, we're collecting information and we're providing that or finding it, we're collecting it, whatever you want to call it, and we're providing that to the client. So that wraps it up, guys. Now, I did tell you about the claims template that was just released. I'm really proud of that. Again, we have also other templates out there. I encourage you to take a look at. We have the surveillance template. We have which you're gonna have to look at it, but it has all, the example report and all that kind of good stuff. We have the private investigator retainer, and we have the intake sheet. All great documents to have, all necessities in one way or another. So definitely check those out. Listen, we thank you for the support that you do to keep this thing running. And I hope you found some value from this today. I'm trying to do a little more self-development on myself here, trying to stretch myself a little bit, learn more, do some more uncomfortable things to make me a better teacher, and better for you, the listener, and the watcher of videos and things like that. So anyways, we're going to get into some of that a little bit more down in the future, but I've got some great podcasts coming up. So I hope you stay tuned for that. Thank you again, guys. Be sure to check out firstdefendertacticalgear.com. Pick up a security badge if you guys are trying to jump into the loss prevention field or security field along with your private investigator business. Alrighty. All right, guys. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.